The reality of taking care of a family, especially if you're a working mom, the reality of taking care of 4 kids means you cannot do it alone. You cannot. It takes a village. And this is something that I've warmed up to and embraced more and more over time, especially in motherhood and even more so in business. I've had people say, how do you do it? Like, how do you actually do what you do? And I super appreciate when people say things like, I admire the work you're doing. I can't believe you're also a mom of 4. I can't believe you have a medical son. I can't believe that you're an entrepreneur running your business on your own. I can't believe, that you're doing these things. And I appreciate that feedback. And at the same time, it also makes me question if I'm being vulnerable and transparent enough about the journey, right? And one of the things that I really pride myself on as a podcaster, as a health coach, as a woman in midlife who has been through the ringer, as someone who wants to be very transparent about the reality, being an entrepreneur, a mom of 4, etc., I sometimes question, have I been honest enough when I get comments like that? Has it been too much of a highlight reel based on what I share? And I do try very hard to share the real parts of my life, the REAL parts of my life. And there's also parts to my life that I don't feel like openly sharing all the time online for the world to see. There's also pieces specifically to my son's health journey that I want to protect him around. At the end of the day, it's his personal journey. It's his health story. And I can talk about my role and what I've learned in his story. But at the end of the day, there are pieces that I want to be private. There are pieces that I want to have protected for him because he's growing older and he deserves the right to choose what's shared, And so I have my heart kind of around this place of talking about motherhood today, the reality of being a mom of 4. What does that really truly mean? What does that really look like? And then when you pair that with entrepreneurship, then what does it even look like to an even deeper degree? How do I get honest about that? How do I get transparent? How do I really speak to the things that I'm not proud of when I think about this journey? So I want to start with talking about the reality of being a mom of 4. I share this story sometimes with people that ask me, and it's kind of comical. And so I want to share it quickly here. Dave and I, when we were thinking about growing our family, we met at Notre Dame, moved to Chicago after college, got married, went abroad for a year. And, we had always talked about growing our family big. We had always wanted to have a big family. Well, we had our first baby abroad in Australia. And that was wild because it was my first baby. I had never been pregnant before. I had never gone through labor before. I was across the world away from everyone, had no family, no friends, no nothing, doing everything completely on our own. And so that was a very eye-opening experience. It also forced us to become very close, very fast as parents because we had no idea what we were doing. And that was, like I said, a very eye-opening experience for us. And when we moved back to the States, we knew we wanted to continue to grow our family. And so we had another baby, had our son, Brendan, and 1 to 2 kids rocked my world. 0 to 1 was a lot. 1 to 2 rocked my world to the point where I had said, I don't know if I can have any more kids. Like I had just talked about, we had always said we wanted to have a big family, but 1 to 2 kids was really overwhelmingly hard for me. It felt so much harder. I felt more buried than I ever had before. It was when I felt like I could not figure out at all how to take care of myself. I was not sleeping well, eating like crap, barely moving my body, surviving at the mercy of these 2 little kids, had no idea how to prioritize myself, let alone fill my cup while taking care of these humans. It was just this massive recalibration of my life. And one of the things I talk about often is how motherhood is just a series of endless transitions. And this was one of those transitions that really rocked my world. And when that happened again, I kind of found myself in this headspace of thinking, how in the world am I ever going to grow our family beyond this? I can't manage anything more. It already feels so big and so overwhelming. And so that was the time when I finally realized and woke up in one of my lowest of low moments that I had to figure out a way to take care of myself again, because I wasn't. For the first year and a half of my son's life, managing 2 kids, being a stay-at-home mom, not working anymore, working in the home, taking care of the home, all of the things, I was not taking care of myself at all. And that was one of the hardest and darkest seasons of my motherhood journey, amongst a few others. But that was one of the hardest. And that was the season where I finally figured out, okay, I have to take care of myself. I have to start taking small steps. I have to figure out something because this is not working. I'm in major survival and I'm never going to make it. And so that's when I started to dig into, eating better and learning about how to work out at home and figuring out how to, protect my sleep and ask for help a little bit more. And I was more transparent with my husband and got more honest about what was actually going on in my body and my brain. I started going to therapy consistently and started working through like all of the things I, for some reason, felt like I had to hold all together on my own, but quickly realized I couldn't and didn't need to. And I did a lot of that work in therapeutic settings. And I knew that that was going to be one of the key pieces to me actually figuring out how to care for myself and ask for help and all the things. And so slowly over time, I started to feel better. And slowly over time, I started to get a better grip on taking care of myself and started to realize how freaking important it was, because showing up depleted and on edge and like a shell of myself was awful. I hated who I was in that season. I hated how I was showing up for my family. I hated how short I was. I hated how I had no energy for anything. And I was literally in massive survival. I hated that. And it took really focused enlisting of resources to get myself out of that pit. Therapeutic support, investing in nutrition and fitness support, getting more open and honest with my husband, asking for help more, delegating more, enlisting someone to help clean our house. Like letting go of things and getting things off my plate was a huge part of the process. And so as we got further away from my son's birth date and he grew older, I kind of started to warm up to this idea of continuing to grow our family like we had always talked about. And so Dave and I continued to kind of discuss, and we decided, okay, we want to continue on with having more kids. And so that's when we got pregnant with our third baby. And our third baby, Jillian, was born 4 years after Brendan. So we have a big gap from our first two to our second two. And when Jillian came along, Brendan and Amelia, our two oldest, were much older, right? 4 and 6. And so Jillian felt like a breeze. She felt really easy to manage. She was a super happy baby. The two older ones were potty trained and helpful and easier to manage too. And like, it felt like this good balance of, okay, I can manage one baby. The two olders are a little bit older. They can do a little bit more. They're self-sufficient. I can still figure out ways to make sure I'm making time for myself. And it was going swimmingly. And then we decided that we wanted to have one more kiddo. And so we got pregnant with our last baby, Rowan, and he was born in October of 2019, right before COVID. And him and Jillian, our third and fourth baby, they were 22 months apart. So they were closer than our first two. Amelia and Brendan are about 28 months apart. Then we had a 4-year gap. And then Jillian and Rowan are about 22 months apart. And I remember like when we had 3 kids and I was pregnant with Rowan, baby number 4, I would have conversations with people and I would say, oh, it's already crazy. We already have 3 kids. I'm sure with number 4, we'll figure it out and it'll be fine. And it was not fine. It was not fine at all. And that's kind of the comedic place inside of the story, or the thing that makes me laugh is there was a point where Dave and I were almost cocky, like, oh, whatever, we got this, 4 kids. It's not going to be that much crazier. It's already crazy. But for whatever reason, it was significantly crazier when our 4th baby came on. And it was right before COVID. And then COVID came, the world shut down. I was homeschooling a kindergartner and a preschooler. I had a toddler. I had a baby. I was breastfeeding. I was still freshly postpartum. I was in total survival. It was also the time where my son, Brendan, started to have seizures again. We were going through this really long, unknown, obnoxious journey of trying to figure out his diagnosis with endless therapies, endless doctors, endless scans in the hospital, trying medications. Like it was wild. And I reflect now back to that season and I really understand now the level of survival I was living in, how my body and my brain were totally fried, that I was literally trying to keep all of these balls from dropping. And I don't even really know exactly how I did it, other than explaining that I was in total survival, in total reaction mode, just trying to make it through the day. And because I've lived in that space, I now know how emotionally numbing it becomes. And you don't always realize the depth of what it does to you until you get out of it and you can see from a hindsight perspective, oh yeah, okay, now I get it. Now I understand. And so I'm sharing this story because, one, I like to kind of share the fact that Dave and I were kind of cocky because it's ridiculous. But I also like to talk very deeply about survival mode because we don't normalize or talk through this enough in motherhood. And when you are managing what you're managing, whatever that is, however many kids it is, alongside a job, a marriage, and all of the things, we all get into a level of high stress, total survival, and total reaction mode. And I want to normalize this and talk about this because this is the reality of what it's been for me for a large portion of being a mom of 4 kids. We'll get back to our conversation shortly after this message. If you are an overwhelmed and completely confused mom who just wants a simplified, easy to follow, and understandable plan when it comes to their health and wellness journey, then you're in the right place. As a wellness coach, I focus most on empowering women to follow a highly personalized and bio-individual plan that actually gets you results and that feels sustainable for your longevity. I'd love to invite you to set up a free coaching call to talk about your health and wellness journey. Head to erinshreer.com/coaching to set up your call today. Again, that URL is erinshreer.com/coaching to set up your call. And to make it even easier, head to the show notes of this podcast and click free coaching session to set up your call ASAP. Now let's dive back into the conversation. And it's taken me time to continue to learn the mental and emotional weight of that. And most importantly, the level of support I've truly needed. And now that I'm in this place where my youngest is 6, my oldest is 14, my middle 2 are 12 and 8, I see so clearly now the things I should have done sooner, the things I should have paid attention to more, and the things that I should have asked about earlier in my journey. And I want to talk about that because, again, when I get feedback of, I don't know how you do it, or I don't know how you're managing this, or I don't know how you're managing that, I want to be honest about I'm not managing anything. So much of my journey has been about surviving. So much of my journey has been about trying to just make it through the day, make it through the season, make it through whatever it is that we're managing, just making it through. And it takes a lot to really pull yourself all the way out of it and realize, okay, that's not how I want to live. So what am I going to do about it? And so that's kind of the next phase of what I want to talk about related to being a mom of 4, but also like building a business and being an entrepreneur, because the biggest and most transformative thing that I have continued to learn, and I talk about this, is how important it is to ask for help. So when I hear things like, I don't know how you do it, the truth is I don't do it. I enlist a lot of help in order to do it. And the more I invest in help, the more I outsource to professionals, the more I bring in mentors, the more I invest really scary dollar amounts in growth and learning and support the way I deserve, the more confident I feel, the more grounded I feel, the calmer I feel, the more at peace I feel. And it's taken me a lot of time to get here. And I like to be honest and transparent about it because I want people to see the full story of what it means to be a working mom. Especially when you have, kids with special needs or kids with medical needs, or you have a specific situation where maybe you have to drive a lot to take your kids to where they're going to school or medical appointments or whatever it is that you live. Like, there is a whole huge dynamic to being a working mom and to having kids when you're trying to go after goals, et cetera, that we don't talk about enough. We don't normalize enough. One of the things I've also learned in this season of motherhood, especially with my kids being younger, is how much I don't want to miss. And unfortunately, how much I did miss in the beginning. In my seasons of massive survival, in my seasons of being so emotionally numb, in my seasons of having my nervous system fried to the max, there's so much I missed. There's so much I missed. When we were in the thick of continuing to uncover my son's genetic disorder, and we were in the thick of seizures, we were in the thick of trying to figure out what he needed to support him. We were in the thick of behavioral problems, a lot of social and emotional hurdles. Like, I've never felt so exhausted in my life. Trying to do that, also manage 3 kids, also have a home, also try to pour into my marriage, also try to keep my health on track, and also try to be an entrepreneur and build my business. When I really think back to it, I was functioning in a really scary place of survival. And, I've had people ask me about how did I build my business? How have I, brought on clients? How have I started to create an income? How have I been consistent with my podcast for 5 years? How have I actually done it? And the truth is I've done it one day at a time. And there have been seasons where it has not been pretty and it has not been easy. And I have not been able to show up the way I really crave. And that's hard to admit, right? Like there are seasons that I reflect back on now and I wish I would have done things sooner, like specifically ask for help, invest in more resources, slow down and get more grounded in what actually matters in the moment. There were seasons in the beginning of my motherhood journey where I was pushing towards really big, exceptional goals, but really at the end of the day, probably didn't align best for the season I was in. And I used to beat myself up talking about how I was a failure, how I wasn't enough, how no matter what I was doing and how hard I was trying, I was never going to be able to make it because I didn't have the capacity or I didn't have the time. And what I've realized now, especially as my kids get older, especially as my business has grown, and especially as I have hindsight to reflect back, it wasn't ever about me being not capable. It wasn't ever about failure. It wasn't ever about anything other than total misalignment. And that's one of the things I want to encourage moms to think about. Because here's the truth. We are not going to be in the season we are in forever. We are not going to be able to do the things we're doing now in the same capacity for forever. Our kids, our families, they are not going to be the same age forever. Whatever our situation is at this point in time, it will change. As someone who's been a mom now for almost 15 years in really hard, heavy seasons, uncovering medical diagnoses, working to build an entrepreneurial business, managing 4 kids, all the things, the one thing I can consistently share with you and confidently tell you is that everything changes, everything shifts. No matter what season you're in, no matter how hard it is, it will change at some point in time. And so I like to make sure that I'm sharing this because I think we can get so hard on ourselves as women and especially as moms when we're trying to balance this idea of goals and dreams and trying to be a present mom and a present wife and take care of our health. Like it becomes so much and it's so easy to get into total survival. And I have a lot of regret around that. I've talked about this before, but I have a lot of regret around that. I have a lot of regret around the things that I've missed because I was so emotionally numb and just trying to grind and press forward and just survive. And there's so much that I know now that I wish I would have known then. Things like working with my female physiology, not burning out my energy, not following a workout calendar because somebody said I needed to do it a certain way, not skipping meals because it worked for somebody else, not sacrificing sleep because I thought I had to always get up early, not pretending my mental and emotional stress wasn't real, not driving my nervous system into the ground and just saying I'm fine. There's so many things I would do differently. But the reason I'm sharing so much of my heart on this podcast today is because I want to share the biggest and most important thing with you, and it's this. The reality of taking care of a family, especially if you're a working mom, the reality of taking care of 4 kids means you cannot do it alone. You cannot. It takes a village. And this is something that I've warmed up to and embraced more and more over time, especially in motherhood and even more so in business. For whatever reason, we kind of get conditioned to hold things tight to the chest and feel like we have to control things and feel like we're responsible and we own it all. And that is a recipe for disaster, a recipe for burnout, a recipe for total survival. And if there's one piece of encouragement I can give you today as I share authentically about my motherhood journey, it's this. You deserve help. So please do what you need to reach out to the people you love and be honest about the load that you're carrying mentally, emotionally, and physically, and talk about the help that you need. There is so much you will miss in your life if you do not accept and instill some level of help in your household, in your relationships, in your business, in your motherhood journey. It is a necessity. And so I wanted to kind of continue to share my heart today because, again, the reality of taking care of 4 kids and being an entrepreneur is that my life is crazy. My life is busy. My life is heavy. My life is hard. My life is overwhelming AF. My life feels like it's spinning out of control some days. And here's the thing that keeps me grounded. Here's the thing that helps me continue to stay the course. It's twofold. The first is constant communication with my husband. We are constantly talking about what our family needs, who is doing what, who's responsible for what, who's cooking this, who's cleaning that, who's packing this for this person. We are in constant communication. Our calendars are synced. We are constantly talking every day. We are splitting the load. It is not all on me and it is not all on him. We are splitting the load. That's the first part. And the second part is remembering that I can't do anything if I'm not pouring into myself. And so my health stays top priority. I schedule it like a meeting and I do not move it because I commit to myself the way I commit to my kids, the way I commit to my husband, the way I commit to my clients, the way I commit to my business, the way I commit to the mentorships I've spent thousands of dollars on. I commit to my health the same way. Why? Because I am done showing up in total survival, being emotionally numb, and missing the stuff in my life that actually matters. And that's what I want to continue to encourage you with, because when you're in a season like this with motherhood and business paired together, it is very easy to get lost in the weeds. And it's very easy to lose sight of what actually matters and to remember the importance of pouring into yourself. And so those are the two things I lean on. That's how I get anchored. By always being in communication with my partner and my husband because I love him dearly and we have to be a team no matter what. And two, pouring into myself and my health. And part of that is also enlisting help when I need it. Because there's no point in trying to manage and control it all. There's no award for how much you manage on your plate. Remember that. This is some of those things that I wish I would have really embraced and understood sooner in my motherhood journey, because it's a big thing. It's a big thing. And I want you to really remember this, because it's so easy to just lose sight of what actually matters. Never forget, when you are raising kids, managing schedules, trying to build something meaningful, keeping a house running, carrying the emotional load for everything and everyone, it's so imperative not to lose yourself. And so think through the things that you maybe need to enlist as far as support goes or help goes, or maybe how you maybe need to be transparent. Maybe how you need to reach out to somebody. Maybe how you need to enlist more support. Maybe how you need to put something off your plate in some way, or take something off your plate in some way. There are so many ways to continue to make sure that you're filling your cup and getting what you need. So don't forget that. The reality of being a mom is that it's hard work. It's the hard work that's worth it, but it's hard work. And you deserve support and encouragement and love and compassion along the way as you're diving into that hard work every single day. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. I know balancing time and energy can be a challenge, and I'm so proud of you for listening in and investing in your wellness journey. I feel incredibly grateful to connect with you and for the opportunity to share more knowledge, stories, and encouragement related to all things wellness. I would love to hear how this podcast has served you. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe and leave a review on either iTunes or Spotify. Your support truly means the world to me and helps me reach more women just like you and me who are looking to transform their health from the inside out. Plus, when you share this episode with a friend, we invite more women in to learn alongside us. What a gift. Remember, knowledge is power, and the more we know, the better we can do. For ourselves, for our families, and our future. Well done on taking the step towards a healthier, happier you. Until next week, stay empowered and stay well.